So I'm doing a little experiment here. I have done a few other sermons in my past, not very many, but a couple. And every time I've done it before, I have meticulously, not in bubble letters, but meticulously written out every single word and then read it. So what I'm trying now is going to be a little more fluid, and hopefully in that fluid way, it will flow and float, and I will not sink in it, and neither will you. So I want to talk about the idea of inherent worth and dignity of every person. And my initial thought, and what I'm going to stick with, obviously, is going to be talking about my experiences working as an advocate. I work for Tri-Valley Haven, but I go into Santa Rita County Jail to provide services. The services that I provide are for people who call and report that they have either been sexually assaulted in the jail, sexually harassed in the jail, or that they may have had some sort of trauma of that kind in their past that is getting brought up by things that are happening within the environment of that jail. So that's sort of what I do. Another thing that I do along with coworkers that you'll see a little glimpse of after I'm done talking is we run therapeutic art groups every Monday and Wednesday in the jail for women who are in medium and maximum security. So some of them are in there for some pretty serious things, or at least are accused. Often they have not gone through trial yet, I should say, are accused of pretty serious things. And we run these therapeutic art groups in order to give space for people to think about ways that they can move forward, to heal from past experiences, to explore emotions, the whole gamut of those sorts of things. And I'm going to give you a little glimpse into some of that artwork when we're done with the talk. And I hope you will enjoy it as much as it moves me. I actually have all those pictures as a screensaver at work because I see them every week and I still don't want to get away from them. I want to see them all the time. So they show up after an astonishingly short period of time when I don't work. They pop up on the screen. All right. So, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. What does that even mean? I was thinking about that and thinking, I think for all of us, it's pretty easy when it's easy to think about that. I find it really easy to think about the inherent worth and dignity of my friends, the inherent worth and dignity of my mom, the inherent worth and dignity of the rest of my family, of the people that I work with. That's easy because I like to think that I surround myself with good people, people who care about other people, people who are involved with other people, people who are kind, or at least try to be kind, and at least value kindness as something that's an important thing in their lives. It's easy when it's easy. And here's where I get a little bit distracted from my jail topic for just a few moments, because probably like many of you, I cannot get John McCain's funeral out of my head. And it got me to thinking a lot. And there were a number of quotes about John McCain. I have my own opinions about John McCain. I got the things I liked, the things I didn't like so much. We're not going to go into politics with that. But there were some quotes that really stood out to me, and I wanted to just introduce those quickly before I move on into the main part of my talk. There was a quote by President Obama about John McCain. It said, "John understood that our security and our influence was won not just by our military might, not just by our wealth, not just by our abilities to bend others to our will, but from our capacity to inspire others with our adherence to a set of universal values like rule of law and human rights and insistence on the God-given dignity of every human being." And for his part, George W. Bush said of him, he respected the dignity inherent in every life, a dignity that does not stop at borders and cannot be erased by dictators. So, I think no matter what we may have thought, good, positive, or in between, about John McCain in our own hearts, this was a man who was widely respected. He is a person that even if we disagreed with him, I think it would be pretty easy for us to apply the first principle and say that this man had inherent worth and dignity and honored inherent worth and dignity in other people. But it gets harder, right? What if the person you're dealing with isn't a lion of the Senate and isn't a war hero? What if they've done questionable things? What if they've hurt other people? What if they've stolen from other people, or beaten them, or raped them? or murdered them? What if you are face to face with someone who every day seems to trample on the dignity and worth of others? How do you honor the inherent worth and dignity of such a person? In good Unitarian fashion, I do not have the answers. I will share with you some of my experiences with people and give you some of my thoughts, and maybe we can continue the discussion as we go along. So the first time that I went into the Santa Rita jail, I was actually the first person in my agency to go, in many years I should say, to go into Santa Rita jail in this capacity. And we didn't really totally know what we were doing. It was just sort of like, Carolyn, we're doing this thing at the jail, and there's somebody who needs to be seen. Would you be the first person willing to do that? And I kind of went, okay. So I didn't quite know what I was getting into. And most of my experience prior to that had been mostly talking to women, a few male survivors, but not a lot of them. Mostly talking to women, mostly people on the crisis line. Sometimes I would meet them at the hospital if I was there to help them through an exam, a forensic exam. I'd never been into a jail in my entire life. I don't know if I'd known anybody who had been in jail for any significant period of time. The first person I met was a man in maximum security. He arrived shackled at the waist into the small room where I was going to meet with him. I was told that there would be a deputy waiting outside the room so that if there was an emergency, I could press a button and they would come really quick. As it turned out, it took at least 15 minutes for them to come. So it's a good thing we got along really well. Here's the thing. He reported that in the past, he had been in prison, and in prison, his cellie, his roommate, had attempted to rape him, had fortunately not succeeded, had been interrupted in the act. He had been out for many years. He had committed another violation. I'll get into that in a moment. And now being back in a tiny cement cinder block room with no windows that you could look out of, with nothing to do, with nothing to see, even though he felt safe with the person that he was with, was raising everything up that had happened to him before. And so he was reaching out for any kind of help he could get. He didn't know what he was going to receive. He just needed something. I discovered as I was talking to him that the reason why he was in jail was that he had attempted to run over his girlfriend with a car, which took me aback a little bit, because up until now, my entire career had been about supporting the victims of intimate partner violence, not talking to the perpetrator of it. And I had to make a quick decision in my head, which maybe might seem obvious, but to me it was not, where I had to decide in that moment, okay, this is going to be what going into the jails is about. I need to respond to the person who was hurt, not necessarily to the part of the person who had hurt others. And how do I do that? And I wasn't sure. So we continued to talk, and he told me about all of his fears and what had happened to him and what had nearly happened and how things were now, and we agreed to meet another time. The second time that I came to meet with him, he asked me very shyly if I would be willing to help him write down an appeal to the jail staff for some support and the ability to talk to a chaplain. And I was like, sure. I didn't really know what he meant by help me. It rapidly became clear that he was basically illiterate. He couldn't write. And he could copy, though. And so he said, well, if I tell you what I want you to say, will you write that down for me? I said, okay. And I said, well, what would you like me to say in this? And I was kind of thinking, like, I figured he was going to be wanting to get help with the fact that he'd nearly been assaulted. And so I was sort of saying, well, do you want me to write down the details, or do you want me just to say kind of in general, I want to talk to somebody about something that happened to me? And he goes, no, I want you to be really specific. I said, okay, I'll be really specific. And I waited for him to tell me about the sexual assault that had happened or nearly happened and what he needed. And he said, I want you to write down that I need help with my anger because I nearly killed somebody that I love very much. And it's not the first time. And I need help, and I need to know how to move forward so that doesn't happen in my life ever again. And I went, oh, okay. And we wrote that down. And that's the last time I ever saw him. And that was my first experience going into the jails. and thinking about the complexity of human beings, and thinking about how we can never assume, and thinking about how we walk in with expectations and stereotypes without ever really knowing that we are doing that until we're confronted with it. So that's experience number one, example number one in my thinking about inherent worth and dignity. Another experience that I had, I'll do these really reasonably quickly, this one would merit an entire sermon all on its own, so I'm just going to tell it very quickly, was a man that I visited who the first time he spoke to me, he only spoke to me in metaphors because what was happening to him I think was too painful to really talk about it directly. But he had this wonderful imagination. And what he told me about is he had the idea for an entire film that he wanted to make as a director. And the film was called, and here I was, this is the really important part, is while I was listening to him, I was thinking to myself, you know, he's talking about films. I'm really supposed to be here to talk about this sexual harassment that he says he's going through. I don't know if this is really on topic. You know, should I kind of derail him? It looks like this is going to go on for a really long time. And I say, well, okay, well, what's the name of this film that you would like to make? And he says, Listen. The name of the film is Listen. And the whole concept was the idea of having people talking about their experiences and not those experiences not being what you saw on that person on the outside. The really put together person who goes in front of the school gym of bored high school students, you know, in assembly, and they're not listening to him and they're not paying attention because he looks like a complete nerd, and the guy pulls up his shirt and there are bullet scars. And he says, listen, I've lived the life that you have. I am here to show you how to get out. Listen. He taught me an important lesson about worth and dignity, because what he was thinking about was paying forward and about the hidden voices of everybody, including himself. Third story. This is the one that really prompted me to want to do this talk today. I don't know if it's a sermon, could be a rambling discourse, but this is what stuck with me the most. So I got a call from another man at the jail. He needed help because he was being severely sexually harassed, he said, by deputies at the jail. I made the mistake of looking up his name and then looking him up. And I found his mugshot. And he was really scary looking. And I thought, okay. And I looked up what he was in for. And he was in for violent rape. And I thought, okay, so you're being sexually harassed by deputies, but you're in for violent rape. What do I do about that? So I talked to my boss, and my boss was trying to be kind to me, which I really appreciate. And she was sort of like, you know, if you don't feel comfortable doing this, you know, I get it. And I had to hit a moment where I was like, no, we don't get to cherry pick. We don't get to cherry pick the survivors that we see. We have to see everybody. But I didn't know what I was letting myself in for. I was just sort of like, rah. So I went to go see this man. I am actually looking at the clock. I think I have 5 more minutes. Number one, he was in a wheelchair. Wow, there went an assumption, right? And we talked. And he was being really, I believed him, he was being really treated horribly by the deputies, who would deny him a chance to take a shower in his 1 hour out of maximum security. In maximum security, in what's known as administrative segregation, or ADSEG, you are locked up for 23 hours a day, alone, in a cell with no one. You have 1 hour out. Usually, if they do that, sometimes you don't every day. Within that 1 hour out, if you are in a wheelchair, not only do you need to do whatever stuff you can do outside of your room for that 1 hour, but you need to get your shower in your shower wheelchair. You need to get a lot of other stuff taken care of. The deputies would basically leave him sitting there for like 45 or 50 minutes and then take him at the last second for the shower, which would mean he wouldn't be able to get done all the other stuff that he wanted to get done before that. He had a deputy who leaned in at one point to him and said, I've never gotten to rape a crippled guy before, but if you keep this up, this is going to be my chance. So we talked. Sorry to give it this rawness, but that's what happened. We talked. And he said to me, among other things, he never talked about the crime he committed, which was the rape, but at one point he said to me, you know, I grew up on the street. I grew up tough. I haven't been in this chair for very long. And I could do whatever I wanted. I could take whatever I wanted. He said, this is the first time in my whole life I felt powerless. I didn't know what it felt like to feel that way until now. And as we got ready to leave, he said to me, I need to ask you something. I said, okay. He said, "Are you a believing woman?" And then he goes, "I don't care if it's Jewish or Muslim or Christian." He's like, "It's all the same God. Are you a believing woman?" I didn't really know what to say because I'm a Unitarian. And so what I said was, I am a spiritual person. And he said, "Okay." He said, "That's good enough." He said, "Will you pray for me? Because I've been in prison most of my life and I think I'm going to die in one. So will you pray for me?" And I didn't want to lie because I don't pray. But I said, "I will hold you in my heart. I will always hold you in my heart." And he said, "Thank you." And I walked out. And there's a long walk. If any of you have had the misfortune of going to the Santa Rita jail, there is a long walk from the lobby all the way down to the parking lot. And I, as I was walking, was thinking on this over again, like, did I say the right thing? Should I have said more? Should I have lied and said I would pray? And then suddenly, literally, I'm not kidding, what popped into my head was the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And I went, oh, this is why I am here. This is what I am doing. This is the root of everything that happens for me in this jail, is I must believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Every person I have met here is reminding me that no matter what they have done, and they've done some horrible things, there is inherent worth and dignity, and there is merit in reaching out, and there is merit in connecting, and that it really is the fundamental reason for being there. Okay, here's where it gets harder for me. We're getting to the end of my little talk. So, okay, I have been going now into the jail for coming up on 5 years or so. I have not yet met anybody that I did not find a way to connect to that inherent worth and dignity. However, I'm stuck on a number of people. I'm not going to go into great detail. But one of those people might have been a person whose lack of a mention at the McCain funeral yesterday was really glaring by omission. Not everybody may agree, and that's okay. This is for me. This is my challenge. My challenge is, if I believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, if that person were to go to prison, and if that person called a crisis line and said, "I am being sexually harassed," what would I do? Would I go? This is honestly one of the few people in the world that I have that much of a struggle with. Because the thing that I really find hard is dealing with people not only who trample on the worth and dignity of others, but are unpenitent about it, who don't seem to acknowledge it, who don't seem to understand that they have done it. I have not yet, in the jail, in my experience, met what I would call a true sociopath, somebody who really doesn't understand that other people are real, who doesn't really understand that empathy is a thing. The people I've met have been hurt, they've been angry, they've been drug addicted, they have learned ways of being in the world to survive that aren't very pretty, but all of them had a spark of empathy. What do you do, theoretically speaking, if somebody doesn't seem to have that? And what I finally had to decide is when I cannot find, if I struggle and I cannot find the inherent worth and dignity in somebody else, if I look and I don't see it, what do I do with that? I thought, I have to remember my own inherent worth and dignity. And part of what gives me inherent worth and dignity is honoring it in others, even when I cannot see it. That I cannot squander my own by not believing it is in someone else. And so my answer was, I will go. I will go to whoever needs it. Not because I am perfect, because boy am I not, but because I have to hold on to the idea that inherent worth and dignity is in fact inherent. And that if I ever lose my grip on that, then I lose my grip on my own. I besmirch my own, and I will have to spend time finding a way to polish that back into brightness. So for me, I know it's not the perfect answer. I would love to be able to come up here and say, I have found the perfect answer to finding inherent worth and dignity in everybody. Yay, I have solved the first principle. I have not. But for me, my working answer for now is, if I cannot see it, I have to believe it is there, and I have to honor it for myself. And I have to do what the other gentleman that I saw in the jail said, which is listen. Listen. Because you never know when you're going to hear that. You never know when that's going to be affirmed, with whom, where, under what circumstances, in a cinder block room without windows, with fluorescent lights. You never know when you are going to connect with the inherent worth and dignity of another, so be ready for it, because it's there. I can't believe I'm doing this. I'm gonna close with 2 more quotes. One of them is from a UU who only named himself Thomas. It's on a website called I Am UU, and I tried to find his last name, and I can't. It just says Thomas. But his quote was, "Everyone who is alive can choose to be their best selves today, regardless of what they did yesterday." And I think part of that is the inherent part of inherent worth and dignity, that you can choose. There is always, no matter what you've done before, the chance to choose today to do something good. And here's the one I can't believe I'm going to close with. I'm going to close with a quote by George Bush about McCain. Because what he said was, and I think this is important for all of us, there was something deep inside him that made him stand up for the little guy, to speak for forgotten people in forgotten places. I cannot think of a more forgotten place than the inside of Santa Rita County Jail. So thank you for coming with me on these small series of stories. So that I did not leave a dead space, which I'm doing. So like I said, these are from the art groups that we run. A few are from our shelter, but most of them are from Alameda County Jail and the people that we work with there. I'm going to scoot down so I can see it.
Here it comes. All right. I'm just going to wait for it to get a little brighter.
I should keep talking.
No, that's okay. We're good. We're good. Here we go.
I see skies of blue and I see clouds of white and the brightness of day. I like the dark and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, singing, how do you do? They really say, I love you. I hear babies cry and I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than we'll know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Someday I wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where trouble melts like a lemon drops high above the chimney top. That's where you find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. The dreams that you dare to, why, oh why can't
At this time, we will be taking our offering.